The alien ship came through Earth's atmosphere trailing fire and smoke. Inside the vessel, Captain Zathara gripped her command chair as another explosion rocked the hull. Her crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to keep the ship from falling apart. They had been attacked by Krell raiders near the outer edges of the solar system. The battle had been brief and brutal. Now the Starwind was dying and they needed help fast. Zathara looked at the blue planet on her display screen. The scans showed a developing civilization, barely into their space age. It was against protocol to make contact with such young species, but she had no choice. Her ship was falling apart, and her crew of 47 needed medical attention and repairs. She opened a communication channel and hoped these beings would understand. The ship came down in the Nevada desert with a grinding crash that shook the ground for miles. Emergency systems screamed warnings as the hull breached in 3 more places. Zathara ordered everyone to stay calm and prepare for whatever came next. Through the cracked viewports, she could see vehicles approaching. Lots of them. Colonel Jake Murphy stood outside the crash site perimeter and stared at the massive alien vessel. He had been in the Air Force for 20 years, and nothing had prepared him for this moment. The ship was real. Aliens were real, and they had just crashed in his jurisdiction. He picked up his radio and started giving orders. They needed scientists, engineers, and probably a lot of coffee. It was going to be a long night. The aliens emerged slowly from their damaged ship. They were tall, with blue-gray skin and large eyes that reflected the desert sun. Their hands had 4 fingers, and they wore uniforms that looked both practical and elegant. The lead alien, clearly their captain, raised her empty hands in what Murphy hoped was a universal gesture of peace. He did the same. Communication proved easier than expected. The aliens had translation devices that picked up radio signals and television broadcasts. Within 2 hours, a woman named Lisa Bennett from MIT had helped calibrate the systems properly. The alien captain introduced herself as Zathara of the Valdari species. She explained their situation calmly but with obvious urgency. The Valdari were explorers for something called the Galactic Coalition. They had been mapping this region of space when Krell pirates ambushed them. The Krell were notorious across the galaxy, raiders who attacked anyone they thought was weak. The Starwind had fought back but taken critical damage. 3 crew members were seriously injured, and the ship's main systems were failing. They needed repairs, supplies, and time. Time they probably did not have because the Krell might come looking for them. Murphy made a decision that would change human history. Instead of treating this as purely a military situation, he called in civilian help. Within 24 hours, engineers from NASA, Boeing, and SpaceX arrived at the crash site. Military specialists came too, but Murphy wanted the best minds working on this problem, not just soldiers. Dr. Helen Brooks arrived with her team from NASA. She was a materials scientist who had spent her career dreaming about moments like this. Now she stood before an actual alien spaceship that needed fixing. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Her team began examining the hull breaches, taking measurements and samples. The Valdari watched nervously at first, then with growing interest as the humans showed genuine desire to help. The Valdari engineer named Selvik worked alongside a human engineer called Pete Morrison. They communicated through tablets and hand gestures when the translators struggled with technical terms. Morrison looked at the damaged hull plating and shook his head. The material was advanced but brittle. He had an idea. What if they used a titanium carbon composite from Earth? It might actually be stronger than the original Valdari design. Selvik was skeptical but agreed to try. They fabricated a test panel and ran it through stress tests. The results shocked the Valdari engineer. The human material was not only stronger but also lighter. Morrison grinned and said they could fix the entire ship this way if given time. Selvik immediately went to tell Captain Zathara. Meanwhile, other teams worked on different problems. A software engineer named Greg Harrison examined the Starwind's computer systems. He found that the battle damage had revealed deeper issues. The Valdari systems were stable but inefficient. Harrison spent 3 days barely sleeping, working with Valdari programmers to streamline the code. The improvements were subtle but significant. The weapon systems attracted attention from military specialists. Master Sergeant Ryan Cooper led a team examining the plasma cannons that had tried to fight off the Krell. He brought in Dr. Nicole Grant, a physicist who worked on experimental energy weapons. Together they discovered something amazing. The Valdari had been using their weapons at less than full potential for hundreds of years. Nobody had ever questioned the original design, Cooper and Grant worked carefully, not wanting to damage anything. They adjusted the magnetic containment fields and improved the cooling systems. When they tested their modifications on a practice target, the results were impressive. The plasma cannons now fired faster, hit harder, and had better range. Zathara watched the test and felt hope for the first time since the attack. On the third day, something unexpected happened. A lieutenant named Amy Clark brought coffee to the work crews. She offered a cup to Zathara, who accepted it politely. The Valdari captain took a careful sip, paused, then took another. Her eyes widened. She drank the entire cup and immediately asked for more. By the end of the day, every Valdari crew member was drinking coffee. Zathara declared it the most wonderful discovery of the mission. The cultural exchange grew as work continued. Young scientists and engineers talked with Valdari crew members during breaks. They learned about the galaxy, about dozens of alien species, about trade routes and politics and dangers. The Valdari learned about Earth, about human history, about how this young species had split the atom and reached their moon in less than a century. A Navy pilot named Danny Rogers spent hours talking with Valdari navigation officers. He asked questions about everything. How did their engines work? What were the Krell really like? How did the Galactic Coalition function? The more he learned, the more concerned he became. The galaxy sounded dangerous, especially the frontier regions, and if the Krell found the Starwind here on Earth, humans would be in danger too. Rogers shared his concerns with Colonel Murphy. The colonel listened carefully and realized the young officer was right. This was bigger than just helping some stranded aliens. Earth was about to become visible to a galaxy full of potential threats. They needed to be ready. Murphy started making phone calls to Washington. This situation needed more than just engineers and goodwill. It needed strategy. By the end of the first week, the Starwind was looking better. Hull breaches were sealed with stronger materials. Computer systems ran more efficiently. Weapon systems exceeded their original specifications. The Valdari crew was healthy, well-fed, and thoroughly addicted to coffee. But the mission had changed. This was no longer just about repairs. Something bigger was beginning, though nobody quite understood what yet. The repair project continued through the second week with growing enthusiasm from both humans and Valdari. What started as emergency fixes had transformed into something much more ambitious. The human engineers could not help themselves. They saw problems and immediately thought of solutions. They saw working systems and wondered how to make them better. Pete Morrison gathered his team around a holographic display showing the Starwind's hull structure. The Valdari had designed their ship for efficiency and elegance. Every curve served a purpose, every system optimized for its role. But Morrison saw opportunities. Human ships were built tough because Earth had harsh environments and humans expected things to break. What if they applied that philosophy here? The composite armor they were installing was just the beginning. Morrison proposed adding redundant systems throughout the ship. Extra power conduits, backup life support, emergency patches for hull breaches. Zathara listened to his presentation and felt conflicted. Her ship would become heavier, less elegant, but it would also be much harder to kill. She approved the changes. Ryan Cooper spent his days in the weapons section with Dr. Grant and a growing team of specialists. The plasma cannons were performing beyond Valdari specifications, but Cooper wanted more. He was a weapons expert who had studied every combat system Earth had ever built. He understood that battles were won by small advantages adding up to victory. The cooling system improvements had been obvious once they looked closely. The Valdari had good technology but conservative engineering. They built things to last centuries, which meant they never pushed the limits. Cooper had no such hesitation. He ran the plasma systems at higher power levels, tested them to failure points, then adjusted them to run just below those limits. The result was weapons that hit 40% harder than original Valdari designs. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Troy Bennett was 23 years old, fresh out of college, and had volunteered for the project because he wanted to be part of history. He was assigned to study the Starwind's computer systems alongside Greg Harrison. While Harrison worked on efficiency, Troy became obsessed with the tactical computers. The Valdari systems processed information sequentially. Each calculation finished before the next began. It was reliable but slow by human standards. Troy had grown up with parallel processing, quantum computing theories, and artificial intelligence. He saw the Valdari computers and recognized they were working with one hand tied behind their backs. Troy spent 72 hours straight fueled by energy drinks and determination. He barely slept, communicated mostly in grunts, and filled 3 whiteboards with equations. When he finally emerged from his work trance, he had a proposal that made the Valdari laugh in disbelief. He wanted to rebuild their tactical computer core using principles they had never considered. Zathara was skeptical. Her people had been building starships for thousands of years. This human child thought he could revolutionize their systems in 3 days, but she agreed to let him try a small-scale test. Troy built a prototype tactical processor using Valdari components arranged in a completely new architecture. When they tested it against the original system, the new design was 40 times faster. The Valdari senior engineer asked Troy to explain how this was possible. The young human showed them theories about quantum states and parallel processing paths. He explained how Earth's computers had evolved to handle multiple tasks simultaneously. The Valdari had never needed such speed because their ships operated independently. Troy argued that faster processing would give them an edge in combat that could mean the difference between life and death. Captain Olivia Stone from the Navy had been observing the project quietly. She was an intelligence officer assigned to learn everything possible about the Valdari and their technology. What she saw concerned her. Every improvement humans made to the Starwind could be adapted to Earthships. But more importantly, she realized the Krell threat was real and might come looking for the Valdari. Stone pulled Colonel Murphy aside during a break. They walked away from the worksite and talked privately. She pointed out that Earth was now visible to hostile aliens. The Krell would not care that humans were young or innocent. If they came here, they would attack. Murphy nodded grimly. He had reached the same conclusion days ago. Earth needed defenses, and they needed them fast. Murphy called a meeting with senior military leadership and key civilian scientists. Dr. Brooks, Ryan Cooper, Pete Morrison, and several others gathered in a secure conference room. Murphy laid out the situation plainly. The Valdari would eventually leave, probably within a month. The Krell might come investigating. Earth had no real space combat capability. They were helpless. Dr. Brooks asked the obvious question. Could they build their own ships using Valdari technology? Murphy shook his head. That would take years, maybe decades. They did not have that kind of time. Cooper spoke up with a different idea. What if they did not build new ships? What if they converted existing vessels? Earth had military ships, orbital platforms, even large civilian spacecraft. With Valdari technology, those could become warships. The idea was radical but possible. Pete Morrison started sketching concepts immediately. Take a Navy destroyer, add Valdari shield generators and weapon systems, upgrade the power plant with fusion reactors. It would not be pretty, but it would work, and they could do it in months instead of years. Zathara was invited to the next meeting. She listened as humans proposed converting their primitive spacecraft into combat vessels. Her first instinct was to say it was impossible. But then she remembered how humans had improved her ship in ways her people never imagined. Maybe it was not impossible. Maybe it was just difficult. The proposal grew more ambitious. Murphy suggested they not only defend Earth but help the Valdari fight back against the Krell. The pirates had been terrorizing the frontier for generations. The Galactic Coalition responded to attacks but never took the offensive. What if Earth changed that equation? What if they built a fleet strong enough to hunt the Krell? Zathara felt emotions she had not experienced in years. Hope, excitement, and a little fear. She contacted the Coalition Council and explained the situation. The response came back 3 days later. The Council was skeptical but willing to listen. If Earth wanted to help fight the Krell, the Coalition would not stop them. But Earth would need to prove they were capable first. Murphy set the plan in motion. He contacted the Pentagon, the White House, and NATO headquarters. Within a week, the project had official backing from multiple governments. The United Earth Naval Initiative was born. Ships from different nations would be gathered and retrofitted. The best crews would be trained. And in the center of it all, the Starwind would serve as the prototype and proof that human Valdari cooperation could produce something special. Work accelerated across multiple sites. The Starwind repairs finished ahead of schedule, and the ship was moved to a secure facility for advanced modifications. Meanwhile, the first Earth vessels arrived for conversion. A guided missile cruiser, 2 destroyers, and a converted cargo ship that would become a mobile repair platform. Each would receive Valdari technology adapted by human engineers. Captain Lance Burton was selected to train on the Starwind. He was one of the best pilots in the Navy, with experience on everything from fighters to carriers. Now he would learn to fly an alien starship. Burton worked alongside Zethara daily, learning Valdari controls and tactics. He brought his own perspective too, suggesting changes that would make the ship easier for humans to operate. The training program expanded to include hundreds of volunteers. Sailors, airmen, and soldiers from a dozen nations learned about energy shields, plasma weapons, and faster-than-light travel. The Valdari crew served as instructors, amazed at how quickly humans absorbed complex information. It normally took years to train a coalition crew. Humans did it in weeks. 3 months after the Starwind crashed in Nevada, Earth had built a small fleet. It was not elegant or sophisticated, but it was ready to fight. 13 ships floated in orbit around the planet, each one a hybrid of human and Valdari engineering. They represented the best hope Earth had if the Krell came calling. Admiral Frank Hayes commanded the fleet from a converted aircraft carrier now designated EDS Enterprise. The ship had been retrofitted with Valdari shield generators, plasma cannons, and a fusion power plant that made the original nuclear reactors look like toys. The Enterprise was bulky and ungainly compared to coalition vessels, but it was tough and packed with firepower. The other ships were similarly converted. The EDS Washington and EDS Shanghai were guided missile cruisers now mounting energy weapons. The EDS Moscow had been a destroyer that now carried enough plasma cannons to take on ships twice its size. Smaller vessels included converted orbital platforms, cargo ships, and even a research vessel that had been transformed into an electronic warfare platform. At the center of the formation floated the Starwind. Zethara's ship had been completely rebuilt during the 3 months on Earth. It retained its elegant Valdari design, but now incorporated human improvements throughout. The hull was stronger, the weapons more powerful, the computers faster. It was arguably the most advanced ship in the Coalition fleet, and it served as the flagship for this unusual force. Dr. Wayne Clark's artificial intelligence system went online fleet-wide on the day before the Krell were expected. The AI, designated Athena, connected all 13 ships into a tactical network. Each ship could still operate independently, but Athena coordinated their shields, weapons, and movements in real time. It was technology the Coalition had never developed because they had never needed it. Human warfare had taught hard lessons about coordination and combined arms tactics. Captain Lance Burton sat in the co-pilot seat aboard the Starwind and ran through final checks. Next to him, Zethara reviewed sensor data and sipped her 5th cup of coffee that morning. The Valdari captain had become thoroughly dependent on the human beverage. She claimed it helped her think more clearly. Burton suspected she was just addicted, but he said nothing. They had bigger problems. The warning came at dawn Earth time. Deep space sensors detected quantum slip signatures at the edge of the solar system. Multiple contacts moving fast, heading toward Jupiter's orbit. The Krell had arrived, and they had brought friends. Admiral Hayes gave the order to launch. All 13 ships activated their engines and moved to intercept. The 2 fleets met near Jupiter. The gas giant provided a dramatic backdrop for what was about to happen. The Krell force consisted of 23 ships of various sizes. Fast raiders, heavy cruisers, and one massive dreadnought that dwarfed everything else in the area. It was an overwhelming force designed to destroy whatever remained of the Starwind and eliminate any witnesses. The Krell had no idea what they were facing. Their sensors showed primitive ships, barely space-worthy, clustered around a single Valdari vessel. It looked like easy prey. The Krell commander ordered an aggressive assault, expecting to sweep through the human formation in minutes. His ships accelerated forward with weapons charging. Admiral Hayes waited until the Krell committed to their attack vector. Then he gave a simple order that rippled through the fleet. All ships engage. The EDS Moscow fired first. Modified plasma cannons pushed beyond normal Valdari specifications, struck with devastating effect. The lead Krell raider's shields collapsed instantly. A second volley tore through the hull, sending the ship tumbling away disabled and venting atmosphere. The Krell formation hesitated. That should not have happened. It should have taken sustained fire from multiple ships to bring down those shields. They had no time to process this information before Athena demonstrated her value. The AI had calculated firing solutions for every Krell ship and positioned the Earth fleet for optimal engagement. Human ships knew where to shoot before the Krell knew where to move. The battle became chaotic quickly. The Krell were experienced raiders with good ships and trained crews, but they had never fought an enemy like this. The human vessels were tougher than they looked, absorbing hits that should have crippled them. Their shields regenerated faster than normal. Their weapons hit harder than standard coalition gear, and they fought as a coordinated unit that seemed to anticipate every Krell move. Commander Julia Martinez piloted the EDS Enterprise through the thickest fighting. Her ship was the largest and slowest in the fleet, which made it a tempting target. 3 Krell raiders focused their fire on the Enterprise, expecting to overwhelm its defenses. The shields held. When a plasma burst got through and scored the hull, the human armor absorbed it. The ship shook violently. Alarms blared throughout the corridors, but the Enterprise kept fighting. Martinez smiled grimly and returned fire. The Enterprise might be slow, but it carried more weapons than any other human ship. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and experimental railguns all fired simultaneously. 1 Krell raider exploded. A second lost power and drifted away. The third tried to retreat but ran straight into fire from the EDS Shanghai. Aboard the Starwind, Burton and Zathara worked in perfect harmony. The Valdari captain handled overall strategy, while the human pilot made split-second tactical decisions. Burton flew the ship in ways that terrified the Valdari crew but kept them alive. He pushed the engines hard, used Jupiter's gravity to slingshot around obstacles, and positioned the Starwind where it could support other ships without becoming an easy target. The Krell dreadnought, designated the Ravager, moved to crush the human center. It was a massive ship built to destroy coalition battle groups. Its commander saw the chaotic melee and decided to end it with overwhelming force. The Ravager pushed through smaller engagements, ignoring hits from human ships, focused on breaking the Earth Fleet's formation. Captain Derek Shaw commanded the EDS Washington and saw the danger immediately. The dreadnought would tear through the fleet if allowed to reach its optimal firing position. Shaw made a decision that would become legendary in Earth's military history. Instead of retreating or calling for support, he ordered all power to forward shields and weapons. Then he turned the Washington directly toward the dreadnought and accelerated. The crew thought their captain had gone insane. They were charging a ship 10 times their size. But Shaw knew what he was doing. The Washington absorbed tremendous damage as it closed the distance. Shield generators screamed in protest as they deflected gigawatt plasma blasts. Hull plating glowed red from near misses. But Shaw got the Washington closer than the dreadnought's heavy weapons could track effectively. At point-blank range, Shaw gave the order to fire everything. Every weapon on the Washington discharged simultaneously into the Ravager's shield emitters. The concentrated firepower overwhelmed the generators in seconds. For the first time in the battle, the Krell flagship was vulnerable. Its shields were down. Admiral Hayes saw the opportunity instantly. He broadcast fleet-wide orders. All ships focus fire on the dreadnought. 12 ships adjusted their aim and unleashed everything they had. The Ravager's heavy armor held for almost 10 seconds under the coordinated assault. Then something critical failed deep inside the ship. The power core destabilized. The explosion was visible from Earth as a brief new star in the night sky. The Ravager simply ceased to exist, torn apart by the uncontrolled release of its own power systems. Debris scattered across thousands of kilometers, some pieces large enough to classify as ships themselves. The shockwave from the explosion damaged 2 nearby Krell cruisers and sent others tumbling out of formation. The remaining Krell ships broke and ran. They'd come to hunt a wounded Valdari vessel and found a disciplined fleet with weapons more powerful than anything they had encountered. As they scattered and tried to escape, General Murphy gave an order from Earth that surprised everyone. Do not let them leave. Disable and capture as many as possible. Earth needed prisoners and intelligence. The chase after the battle was brief but intense. The Earth Defense Fleet had been built with modified engines that combined human fusion technology with Valdari quantum slip drives. The result was ships that could match or exceed most vessels in the galaxy for speed. The fleeing Krell discovered this the hard way. The EDS Shanghai caught the first runner. Commander Victor Lee brought his ship alongside a Krell raider and disabled its engines with precision fire. The raider lost power and drifted helplessly. Lee dispatched a boarding team to secure the vessel and take prisoners. It was Earth's first capture of an intact alien warship. One by one, the Krell ships were run down. Some fought desperately and were destroyed. Others surrendered when they realized escape was impossible. By the time the pursuit ended, Earth forces had captured 7 Krell vessels and taken over 200 prisoners. 5 ships had been destroyed trying to fight their way free. The rest had died in the main battle. Admiral Hayes gathered reports from all ships as they returned to Earth orbit. The damage assessment was better than anyone had hoped. The EDS Washington needed extensive repairs after its suicidal charge against the Dreadnought, but the ship was intact, and the crew had suffered only minor injuries. The Enterprise had taken heavy hits but remained combat effective. Several smaller vessels needed work on their shield generators and hull plating. Most importantly, Earth had lost no ships and suffered fewer than 30 casualties, none fatal. It was an incredible outcome for a fleet's first real battle against experienced enemies. Hayes knew they had been lucky, but he also knew the human improvements to Valdari technology had made the difference. The Krell had expected to fight a standard coalition vessel. Instead, they faced something new and deadly. Captain Burton and Zathara brought the Starwind back to orbit and immediately began analyzing combat data. The Valdari captain was exhausted but exhilarated. Her ship had performed flawlessly. The human modifications had turned a good vessel into an exceptional one. She watched the battle recordings and marveled at how the Earth fleet had fought as a single coordinated unit. Burton poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Zathara. The human pilot looked tired but satisfied. He asked the question that had been on his mind since the battle started. Had she known Earth could win? Zathara considered her answer carefully. She admitted she had believed humans had a chance, but even she had not imagined such a decisive victory. The galaxy was about to get very interesting. The victory was broadcast across Coalition space within hours. The Starwind's communication systems had been recording and transmitting the entire battle on standard Coalition frequencies. By the time the Earth fleet returned home, half the civilized galaxy knew what had happened. Earth, an unknown world with a developing civilization, had just defeated a Krell strike force that would have required a full Coalition battle group to handle. Ambassador Patricia Lewis found her office flooded with communication requests within a day. 17 different species wanted to talk to Earth. 4 major trading consortiums requested meetings. The Galactic Coalition Council itself sent a formal invitation for Earth to send diplomatic representatives. The planet that nobody knew existed a few months ago was suddenly the most talked-about world in the galaxy. General Murphy coordinated the response with civilian leadership. President Martinez addressed the United Nations and explained what had happened. The world learned that aliens were real, Earth had just fought and won a space battle, and humanity was being invited to join a galactic community. It was a lot for people to process. The captured Krell ships and prisoners became valuable intelligence sources. Dr. Brooks led teams examining the enemy vessels. They were well designed but not particularly advanced. The Krell succeeded through aggression and numbers, not superior technology. That was encouraging. It meant Earth's hybrid ships could compete with most threats they might face. Major Eddie Foster handled prisoner interrogations with the help of Valdari translators. The Krell were not particularly loyal to each other. With proper incentives, several prisoners talked freely about their operations. Foster learned about Krell base locations, supply routes, command structure, and most disturbingly, who supported them. The intelligence Foster gathered painted a troubling picture. The Krell were not just random pirates. They had financial backers, legitimate corporations that used them as deniable assets for raids on competitors. Some coalition members quietly supported Krell operations because it kept frontier regions unstable and prevented rivals from expanding. The corruption ran deeper than anyone suspected. General Murphy took this information to Admiral Hayes and Ambassador Lewis. They agreed the Coalition Council needed to know. If Earth was going to join the galactic community, they would do it by exposing problems others wanted hidden. Lewis prepared a detailed report with evidence from interrogations, captured ship logs, and financial records recovered from Krell computers. The Coalition Council meeting was held 3 weeks after the Battle of Jupiter. Ambassador Lewis attended with Admiral Hayes and General Murphy as advisors. Zathura came as well, her role having evolved from stranded explorer to humanity's primary advocate in coalition politics. The council chamber held representatives from 47 species, and all of them wanted to hear what Earth had to say. Lewis began with a simple statement. Earth had defended itself against unprovoked aggression. In doing so, they had captured evidence of widespread corruption and criminal activity, that the coalition had ignored for too long. She presented the evidence methodically, naming names and showing proof. Several council members tried to object or dismiss the claims. Lewis calmly provided more evidence until objections stopped. The scandal that followed shook the coalition government. 3 senior officials resigned. 2 major trading houses faced sanctions and criminal investigations. A dozen smaller entities were exposed as Krell supporters. The council was forced to acknowledge that the Krell problem existed because they had allowed it to exist. Earth had not only won a military victory, but had forced the coalition to confront uncomfortable truths. Amid the chaos, the council made an offer. Earth could join the coalition with provisional membership and a fast track to full status. They would have access to galactic trade, technology exchanges, and mutual defense agreements. In return, Earth would need to contribute to galactic security, follow coalition law regarding warfare and commerce, and share some of their innovations. President Martinez consulted with world leaders before responding. The offer was generous, but Earth needed to set clear boundaries. They would join as equals, not as junior partners grateful for acceptance. Earth would maintain independent military forces and make their own defense decisions. Technology sharing would happen on mutually beneficial terms, not as tribute to senior species. The negotiations took 6 weeks. Captain Laura Wright served as military liaison, working out details of how Earth forces would integrate with coalition fleets. Dr. Kevin Brooks handled technology transfer agreements, ensuring Earth got as much as they gave. Finally, a framework was agreed upon. Earth would join the coalition with special status recognizing both their capabilities and their need to develop independently. But membership was just the beginning of something bigger. The Krell problem remained. Frontier worlds were still vulnerable to raids. Trade routes were still dangerous. Admiral Hayes proposed a bold solution during a private meeting with coalition military leadership. A joint task force should hunt down and eliminate Krell bases systematically. The coalition had never attempted such an operation, considering it too expensive and difficult. Hayes argued that Earth had proven they could fight effectively with limited resources. The coalition had infrastructure and intelligence networks Earth lacked. Together, they could accomplish what neither could alone. The proposal was controversial. It would require unprecedented cooperation between coalition forces and the unknown humans. But the evidence of corruption had made many coalition leaders angry. They wanted action, not more defensive postures. After heated debates, the Coalition Council approved a trial operation. A joint fleet would form with both Coalition and Earth vessels. The mission would target 3 confirmed Krell bases in frontier regions. If successful, the operation would expand. If it failed, Earth would need to prove themselves in other ways. It was a test, and everyone knew it. The Joint Task Force assembled over 3 months at a coalition military station in the frontier. 30 coalition vessels arrived from various member species, each bringing their own traditions and capabilities. Earth sent 25 ships, a significant expansion from the original 13 that had fought at Jupiter. The combined fleet represented the largest anti-piracy operation in coalition history. Commander Shane Mitchell arrived at the station aboard the EDS Washington, now fully repaired and upgraded. He was surprised to find himself sharing command with a Valdari admiral named Corvin. The arrangement was unusual but made sense. Mitchell understood human tactics and capabilities. Corvin knew the frontier, the Krell, and how coalition forces operated. Together, they planned an operation that would combine the best of both approaches. The first target was a Krell base in an asteroid field near a system called Viridian. Intelligence indicated 40 Krell ships used the base, along with support facilities and stolen goods worth millions in galactic currency. The base was heavily defended with automated weapons platforms and sensor networks. Previous coalition attempts to attack it had failed. Mitchell and Corvin planned a 3-phase assault. Coalition ships would approach from one vector, drawing the base's attention and defensive fire. Earth ships would slip in from a different angle, using the asteroids for cover. Once in position, both forces would strike simultaneously, overwhelming the defenders before they could organize resistance. It was aggressive and risky, exactly the kind of plan that made coalition officers nervous but human commanders excited. The attack began at dawn local time in the Viridian system. Coalition cruisers emerged from quantum slip at the edge of the asteroid field and began a slow, obvious approach. Krell sensors detected them immediately, and defensive platforms powered up. Raiders scrambled from the base to intercept. Everything went according to plan from the Krell perspective. They had defended against raids before. What they did not expect was the EDS Shanghai and 9 other Earth vessels appearing among the asteroids, already inside the defensive perimeter. Commander Victor Lee gave the order to fire. Human ships unleashed coordinated strikes on the automated defense platforms, destroying 12 in the first volley. Before the Krell could react, Coalition vessels accelerated and joined the attack. The Krell base was destroyed in 40 minutes. Some raiders tried to flee and were run down by faster human ships. Others fought desperately and died defending stolen goods. A few surrendered when they realized the situation was hopeless. By the time the smoke cleared, Earth and Coalition forces had eliminated a Krell stronghold that had operated for 15 years. The operation was repeated at 2 more bases over the following month. Each attack followed similar patterns. Coalition ships provided the obvious threat, while Earth vessels used aggressive tactics to catch defenders off guard. The combination proved devastating. The Krell had learned to predict and counter standard Coalition tactics. They had no defense against human unpredictability backed by advanced technology. But the campaign was about more than just destroying bases. Wherever the fleet went, they liberated civilian populations that had been terrorized by Krell raids. Human medical teams treated wounded. Engineers helped rebuild destroyed infrastructure. Diplomats from both Earth and the Coalition met with local leaders to establish trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Captain Veronica Hunt commanded a hospital ship that accompanied the fleet. The converted cargo vessel carried medical supplies and personnel from 15 nations. Hunt and her team treated thousands of civilians during the campaign. They saved lives that would have been lost and earned gratitude from species across the frontier. The Krell had brought fear and destruction. Earth brought healing and hope. The campaign expanded as success built upon success. What started as a trial operation targeting 3 bases grew into an 8-month effort that destroyed 17 Krell strongholds and scattered dozens of raider groups. Trade routes that had been dangerous for generations became safe. Frontier colonies that had lived in fear could finally prosper. Earth's contribution went beyond military action. Human engineers introduced new construction techniques that helped rebuild faster. Teachers established schools in liberated areas. And wherever Earth ships went, they brought coffee. The human beverage became a cultural phenomenon across the frontier. Cafes appeared on space stations. Trading posts began stocking coffee beans. Zethara joked that humanity's greatest export might be their caffeinated beverages rather than their military technology. The economic benefits flowed both ways. Earth gained access to galactic markets for the first time. Advanced medical treatments that would have taken decades to develop on Earth became available immediately. Clean energy systems based on Coalition fusion technology were installed across the planet. Earth's cities became cleaner and more efficient within a year. In exchange, Earth's manufacturing capacity made them valuable trade partners. Human factories could produce goods quickly and cheaply, using techniques the Coalition had never developed. Earth's agricultural systems fed growing populations on frontier worlds. Human creativity in solving problems became a commodity as valuable as any technology. The Naval Academy at Annapolis began accepting students from Coalition species. Young Valdari, Zilvani, and others studied alongside human cadets. The cultural exchange went both ways. Human students trained on Coalition worlds, learning alien tactics and technologies. A generation of officers who saw the galaxy as one community, rather than separate species, began their careers. General Murphy visited the fleet near the end of the campaign. He toured Earth ships, talked with crews, and observed joint operations with Coalition vessels. The coordination between human and alien forces had become seamless. They fought together, trained together, and trusted each other. Murphy realized they had built something more valuable than a military alliance. They had created genuine partnership. Zethara prepared to leave Earth's fleet and take command of a Coalition battle group. Her discovery of humanity and her role in bringing them to the galactic stage had made her legendary. She was offered positions throughout Coalition space, but chose a frontier command where she could continue working with Earth forces. Before departing, Zethara met with Murphy one last time over coffee. They discussed how much had changed in a year. The Valdari captain admitted she had hoped for repairs and maybe some interesting technology when she crashed on Earth. She never imagined that emergency landing would transform galactic politics and her own career. Murphy raised his cup in a toast. Zethara had come to Earth broken and desperate. She left with an upgraded ship, a powerful new ally, and enough coffee to fuel her fleet for a year. That seemed like a good trade. Zethara laughed and agreed, but noted that humanity had gained something more valuable. They had gained the stars not as visitors but as equals. The Starwind departed from Earth orbit for the last time, now serving as Zethara's flagship. Lieutenant Danny Rogers watched from mission control as the ship disappeared into quantum slip. Earth's journey to the stars had started with one damaged vessel and a crew that needed help. It had become a partnership that changed the galaxy. The United Earth Naval Initiative continued to grow. Within 5 years of first contact, Earth operated 75 vessels and maintained bases on 4 coalition worlds. The Academy graduated classes of mixed-species officers every year. Human-designed ships became popular throughout coalition space for their durability and firepower. Earth had become a major player in galactic politics. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. Humanity's emphasis on cooperation over competition, their willingness to help even when not profitable, and their infectious enthusiasm began to shift galactic attitudes. The coalition had been stable but stagnant for centuries. Earth brought energy and innovation that reminded older species why they had formed the coalition in the first place. Coffee became the unofficial beverage of the frontier. Space stations featured cafes serving dozens of variations. Diplomatic meetings began with coffee service. It became a symbol of the human approach to galactic relations, warm, energizing, and meant to be shared. 20 years passed after the Starwind's emergency landing in Nevada. Earth had become a full member of the Galactic Coalition, with permanent seats on several important councils. The planet that nobody knew about 2 decades ago now influenced policy across hundreds of worlds. The transformation had been remarkable. Ambassador Lewis retired from her position after serving Earth's interests in coalition politics for 2 decades. She had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, and established Earth as a voice that commanded respect. Her retirement ceremony was held at Coalition headquarters with dignitaries from 40 species attending. It was a testament to how far humanity had come. Zethara gave the keynote address at the ceremony. The Valdari Admiral was now one of the most decorated officers in Coalition history. She commanded a battle group that included ships from a dozen species, including several Earth vessels. Her career had been defined by that day 20 years ago when her damaged ship limped into an unknown solar system. Zethara spoke about the moment she decided to land on Earth. She had been terrified and desperate, with a damaged ship and injured crew. The decision to contact a primitive species violated protocol, but she had no choice. What she found on that desert planet changed everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. The Valdari Admiral described watching humans work on the Starwind. They did not just fix problems. They looked at working systems and wondered how to make them better. They approached challenges with enthusiasm rather than caution. They shared knowledge freely and helped without expecting immediate payment. It was so different from standard coalition behavior that Zethara initially thought it was a trick, but it was not a trick. It was simply how humans approached the world. They believed strongly that cooperation produced better results than competition. They assumed problems could be solved with enough effort and creativity, and they were always willing to help people in need. These attitudes had been forged through thousands of years of human history, through cooperation that allowed survival on a challenging world. Zethara raised her cup of coffee, now a traditional gesture at coalition events. She proposed a toast to humanity. May their coffee stay hot, their ships stay fast, and their friendship stay true. The gathered dignitaries raised their own cups and repeated the words. It had become a standard blessing across the coalition. After the ceremony, Zethara met privately with General Murphy, who had also retired from active service. They sat in a quiet garden overlooking the coalition capital and talked like old friends. Murphy asked if Zethara ever regretted that day in Nevada. She thought carefully before answering. There had been difficult moments. The battle at Jupiter could have ended differently. The political fights in the coalition had been exhausting. The campaign against the Krell had cost lives on both sides. But Zethara did not regret any of it. That emergency landing had given her people an ally and friend. It had given the coalition new energy and purpose, and it had given her personally a sense of accomplishment she had never imagined. Murphy understood completely. Earth had faced its own challenges. The rapid introduction to galactic politics had caused social upheaval. Some people feared aliens and resented the changes. Economic disruption from new technologies had hurt some industries even as others flourished. But overall, the benefits far outweighed the costs. Humanity had reached the stars and found their place among them. They discussed the future over multiple cups of coffee. The Krell threat had been largely eliminated, but new challenges emerged constantly. Frontier expansion created border disputes. Trade disagreements threatened to become conflicts. Younger species wanted more voice in coalition affairs. The galaxy was never peaceful, but now Earth helped maintain the balance. Back on Earth, a monument stood in Nevada where the Starwind had first landed. It depicted Zathara and Colonel Murphy shaking hands with the alien ship visible in the background. The plaque described how two species met as strangers, worked as partners, and departed as friends. From repairs came upgrades. From crisis came opportunity. From coffee came community. Murphy visited the monument regularly during his retirement. He would sit on a bench facing the sculpture and imagine having coffee with Zathara. The galaxy had changed dramatically in 20 years. Humanity had changed, but some things remained constant. The willingness to help others, the belief that problems could be solved, the understanding that cooperation produced the best outcomes. The Earth Defense Fleet continued its patrols as a permanent part of coalition security. Human vessels had evolved beyond the simple conversions that fought at Jupiter. Modern Earth ships incorporated the best coalition technology while maintaining human design principles. They were tough, reliable, and respected throughout civilized space. Young officers from dozens of species trained together at academies on Earth and coalition worlds. They learned each other's languages and customs. They studied historical battles and modern tactics. They became friends and colleagues who saw the galaxy as one community rather than competing factions. This new generation would lead the coalition into the future. The frontier was safer than it had been in centuries. Trade flourished along routes that had been too dangerous for regular use. Colonies that had struggled to survive now prospered. The success of the anti-Krell campaign had proven that coordinated action could solve problems that had seemed permanent. The coalition had learned to act decisively rather than just react to crises. Earth's economy had been transformed by galactic trade. Advanced medical treatments extended lifespans and cured diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. Clean energy from fusion reactors made fossil fuels obsolete. Manufacturing techniques from various species created abundance without destroying the environment. Earth had become a cleaner, healthier, more prosperous world, but Earth gave as much as it received. Human agricultural methods fed growing populations across the frontier. Earth's factories produced goods that were shipped throughout coalition space. Human creativity and problem-solving became legendary. When a challenge seemed impossible, people said they needed to think like humans. The cultural exchange went deeper than just trade and technology. Human music became popular on alien worlds. Coalition art styles influenced Earth culture. Mixed species families became common as different peoples worked and lived together. The barriers between species were breaking down through simple daily interaction. Coffee remained the symbol of human influence. Every space station had cafes serving the beverage in hundreds of variations. Diplomatic meetings began with coffee service. Ships carried coffee as a trade good more valuable than many precious metals. Zathara's addiction had become a galactic phenomenon. Dr. Brooks reflected on the past 2 decades during an interview at NASA headquarters. She had been there from the beginning, one of the first civilians to examine the damaged Starwind. The reporter asked what she thought was humanity's greatest contribution to the coalition. Brooks considered the question carefully. It was not the weapons technology, though that had been important. It was not the manufacturing capacity or agricultural methods. Earth's greatest contribution was changing how the coalition thought about problems. Humans assumed challenges could be overcome rather than managed. They believed cooperation produced better results than competition. They helped others without calculating immediate returns. These attitudes had spread through the coalition like ripples in a pond. Species that had been rivals for centuries began cooperating. Problems that had been considered unsolvable were tackled with new approaches. The coalition became more dynamic, more innovative, and more effective at helping its members prosper. The Starwind still served as Admiral Zethar's flagship. The ship had been rebuilt and upgraded multiple times over 20 years. Very little of the original vessel remained, but it kept the same name and designation. It was a reminder of where everything began. A damaged ship seeking help and finding friendship. Murphy's final visit to the Nevada monument came on the 20th anniversary of First Contact. A ceremony was held with veterans from the Battle of Jupiter, scientists who had worked on the Starwind repairs, and young students who had never known a world without aliens. Murphy gave a short speech about helping others and taking chances. He talked about the moment Colonel Jake Murphy, younger and more nervous, had decided to call in civilian engineers instead of treating the Starwind as purely a military situation. That decision had changed everything. It set the tone for Earth's relationship with the Coalition. Not fear or suspicion, but curiosity and willingness to help. As the sun set over Nevada, Murphy raised a cup of coffee in silent toast. To Zethara, who had trusted humans when she had no other choice. To the engineers and scientists who had worked miracles. To the soldiers and sailors who had fought at Jupiter. To everyone who had built the partnership between Earth and the stars. The galaxy was better because of what they had accomplished together. The story of First Contact would be told for generations. How humanity reached the stars not through their own technology, but by helping someone in need. How repairs became upgrades. How crisis became opportunity. And how coffee became the universal language of friendship across the galaxy. It was a good story, Murphy thought, because it was true.